Konnichiwa. Oh, and howdy. I'm Grey Pilgrim. Well, I just wanted to talk about something here for a minute. We think of linear progress. You know, stones and sticks led to wrapping a stone on a stick, and that ended up being a hatchet or something. And that progressed into with the atlatl and the spear to the bow, and eventually the gun, and eventually rockets and nuclear weapons. Progress. Well, sort of kind of in Japan. In Japan, up until about the 16th century, 1540s, everything was going along just fine. And then some of these round-eyed traders came from Portugal and landed on the southern island of Tanegeshima. Not one of the main islands. It's a sort of a peripheral island. And the daimyo, the feudal leader of Tanegeshima, had his retainers go down to the beach and meet these white-skinned devils. And turns out they wanted to do some trading. So, well, being the entrepreneurial kind, the daimyo said, okay, bring them up here and we'll chat. And they had a priest who understood Chinese, and the Portuguese had they brought a Mongol or something who also understood Chinese. So this guy knew Chinese and Japanese, and this one knew Chinese and Portuguese. So they were able to communicate that way. Well, after trading for bits and bobs and things that the two could share, for instance, the Japanese had a whole bunch of silk, and the Portuguese had other things. And, oh, by the way, would you be interested in a fire stick? And here stands all of the samurai and the retainers, and they've got these things. And they're thinking, what could possibly beat a wakizashi, or a katana, or a tanto? And, remember, the Japanese society was very, very stratified. And up until the middle of the 17th century, well, actually the beginning of the 17th century, lots of clans were fighting it out. Where a very powerful daimyo and a lesser daimyo would have to reach alliances, or the more powerful one would conquer him. So there was always this flux going on in Japan of various provinces and regions fighting each other. And they called it the several hundred years of war. Twice during all of this, two clans had actually gotten brief periods of peace by appointing an extremely effective marshal of all of the clans. That marshal is called a shogun. Twice, and both times they fell. One had based his shogunate out of Kyoto. Now, what's Kyoto? That's where the royal family lives, because the emperor still rules Japan. They did then, they do now. And the Japanese emperor was ostensibly the ruler of all of them. And sort of kind of he was, and sort of kind of he wasn't. I mean, he was more of a figurehead ruler. Well, the problem was that the shogun who took over. Now I'm really yardsticking this and painting with a broad brush, because I am not that familiar with Japanese history. But the shogunate that was in Kyoto just sort of fizzled, because they got caught up in palace politics and infighting. And while that was going on, daimyos out in the countryside were revolting, and suddenly they didn't have a power base at all, and they went under. So when the Portuguese landed, they were in the middle of this flux. This was about 1543-ish. And the Portuguese, like I said, showed off to the shogun, oh, not the shogun, the daimyo, one of these new boomsticks. And he says, oh, that's pretty cool. And could you teach me? And they said, basically, your lordship, we can teach anybody. So they taught him, and they gave it to him as part of a trade deal, and he just loved it. He became the world's first Japanese gun nut. He was shooting everything and anything and any time he could. He had targets set up all around his palace and was blasting away. And then he turned to his smiths and fabricators and said, take this and make it. Well, they tried. They made a tube, but the problem is that the Portuguese were using a type of matchlock called an arbicus. And the arbicus is a specific design of matchlock. And anyway, among other things, the Japanese smiths could not figure out how to close the pipe on the butt end of it correctly so that they could contain the explosion. Until they got a hold of some Chinese blacksmiths who knew the secret of that. And I don't know where these guys came from, but somehow they showed up and his smiths figured it out. Well, they started making their own. And since this all took place on the island of Tanegeshima, the matchlock arbicus rifle that was being used, smoothbore, was called a Tanegeshima. Tanegeshima, that's it. I'm lousy at names. Now, one of these clans that was fighting around and scrapping a lot learned of this and bought a bunch of them, and then got their smiths to figure out how to do it, and started making them by the boatload. And that particular clan was at that moment in a war with another bigger clan called the Toyotomi. And the Toyotomi were a powerful clan with aspirations. But the other clan decided, you know, we can develop battle tactics based on this new boomstick. And they did. And that particular clan was called the Tokugawa. And the Tokugawa, in a battle in, I forget where, Osaka or something like that, ended up in control of they beat the Toyotomi. And that was the last major obstacle against them becoming, or their head of the clan, and I forget his name, becoming the shogun, the first shogun. And because his capital was down in a little town called Edo, in 1603 began what we call the Edo period. And the Edo period lasted until 1880-something, when they revolted against the shogunate, and it became the Meiji Restoration of the emperor. Well, the reason I'm talking about all this, with a wakizashi beside me and a katana, is I wanted to show you my latest acquisition, a Tanegeshima. Not really, this is a replica. The originals are rather expensive. I looked into it, and I can't afford it. But there's a company that makes these replicas. Now, the way they work is the serpentine thing here acts sort of like, it's not a hammer, this is a cock. And this is a pan. And this swings out, and you would load up powder in here, and then when you're on the move, you'd close it. You would have a lit punk, a match, a slow match, which was just a rope that had been soaked in, well, usually urine was what they used. But what I do is I've made them myself. You just take a cotton, not a nylon, a cotton rope. It has to be 100% cotton, and soak it in potassium nitrate that's been dissolved in water. Then let it sit and air dry, completely dry. Then you light one end of it, and the potassium nitrate makes that cotton continue to burn. And you can get, with a long enough rope, and what you do is you put the rope through here and it comes out the mouth, and then hang down, you know, basically put it over your shoulder or rope it up or whatever. An original Tanegeshima would have a hole through here so that you would pull it through like this and hang it on the left side of the thing. Then, when you're ready to fire, you do like this and do that. Now, you may notice that there's Not much in the way of a butt. That's because you don't shoot it like this. No, no, no. You shoot it like this, where you have your hand back here, holding it like this with your wrist, and then hit the trigger like that. By the way, you'll notice this mainspring here, this is for show. Normally this would be the mainspring and would cock the lock, or cock I guess you'd call this the cock. I don't know what terms, it's not exactly like a Western gun. But this particular one works on a spring that's inside the stock. And this thing is just for show. So, you know, it's cheap. This is cheap. And it was cheap to buy. You'll notice it has this ball-shaped trigger on it, which was common back then. There were 2 or 3 different styles of this. Now, the thing about the Tanegeshima is that they made them in pistols. Those were mainly just like American pistols. You'd hand those out to generals. A short carbine version was used for mounted horsemen. A longer one for cavalry or for infantry, and then a huge one that you would hang on the side of a castle. It's a siege gun. And if Ian McCollum did an excellent video about them. I guess Morphe's had gotten in one. I forget Morphe's or Rock Island, but one of them had gotten in a Tanegeshima for sale, and he was using it as an example while he was talking about them. But this is a good replica example of it, and I find it fascinating. I just find guns interesting, the historical nature of them. The samurai who carried this, I forget what the word is for their foot soldiers, because the way it works is daimyo would have samurai, and the samurai would be various levels of economic levels. Under the Tokugawas, daimyos were being graded by how much they could pay in taxes, and taxes were always paid in rice. So if you had a flood basin that you could grow a bunch of rice in, then you could pay a lot of taxes, and then you would have prestige in the court. If you lived on the side of a mountain, and all you could do was do some terraces and grow a pittance, you wouldn't end up exactly high up in court. But anyway, each daimyo before the Tokugawa period would have various samurai working for him to protect him from other daimyos. And each samurai would have foot soldiers under him. And then all of them would have peasants under them. And at the bottom of the rank was traders, guys who would travel around and sell things like pots and pans and stuff. They were really, in the caste system of Japan, they were considered the lowest of the low. That changed over time. Eventually, especially under the Meijis, the merchant class really took off and created what later became known as zaibatsus, which are the big, huge conglomerates. For instance, the Toyota family and others like them. The Toyota family has been around since the 18th century. Oh, actually, much earlier, but that we know of, as a conglomerate, a multi-million dollar, billion yen, trillion yen conglomerate. Anyway, I'm just discussing Japanese stuff because it's something that fascinates me. Oh, by the way, this is actually I don't have a kimono, but I do have this is a bathrobe my ex-wife gave me when she toured Hong Kong many years ago. Pretty cool though, it's silk. What do you think? I think it's kind of cool. And I picked that up at a yard sale. You know, mix and match, come up with something that works as a prop. Anyway, domo arigato gozaimasu. And happy trails.